Today I'm going to explain why there are no conservative men left in America. So, first of all, let's talk about what we mean here. So, the dominant institutions are reshaping male behavior to safety seeking, approval seeking, conflict avoidance, and all of this is fundamentally what I consider to be feminized. Okay? The systems are selecting against what I think of as old school masculinity. So, some definitions first. Conservative, in this sense, doesn't mean Republican or I like guns, I own guns, and so on. Okay, this is not what we're talking about here. This is not conservative. Conservative is about duty over desire. It's about understanding hierarchy and competence, and especially hierarchies that are based on competence. Okay, all of this requires a certain amount of risk tolerance. Okay, you need to have fortitude and restraint. What do I mean by restraint? This means long-term thinking, delaying your desires, and so on. Okay, local loyalty, so local over national or even global. And you have to have a moral spine. What do I mean by a moral spine? It means that you have to tolerate being ostracized for having the right position. Okay, the right position requires a moral spine, which I think is very much sorely lacking in our current society. So what do I mean by a feminized society? Well, all the institutions reward safety and compliance. All right, conflict becomes moralized. Right. So this doesn't mean that men are wrong per se. It's that masculinity is harmful and toxic under the current institutional structure. And you can see this in government, you can see this in corporate America, you can see it all over the place. It manifests basically everywhere. All right, now, it values social proof over competence. And this means that it values things like credentialism, okay? I know a lot of people who have PhDs and master's degrees and they're functionally retarded. All right, they're not particularly smart, but also they have almost no tolerance for risk. A lot of these people, they, in order to get the credentials, all right, you basically have to play it safe for your whole life, follow the rules, and be a good boy, right? And actual masculine behavior is pathologized. All right, they call you toxic when you're assertive, when you understand dominance games and you understand how to play them, and when you tolerate physical risk, right? Mike Tyson famously said that, people would be a lot more careful with what they say if there was a risk that they got punched in the face for it. There used to be a time where, if the shit that people say sometimes, man, I really do want to fucking punch them in the face. I really do. But this is heavily discouraged in our society now, right? If you even if someone deserves it, if you punch someone in the face, you're the problem. Okay? So bureaucracies punish disorder, improvisation, risk. All right? The environment, the very ocean that we're swimming in, the culture, the politics, corporate America is fundamentally domesticated. It's a longhouse, right? And if you know anything about longhouse culture, we're living in a longhouse. It's domesticating and it's feminized. All right, why? Institutional capture. Most people go from school, right? And in school, you're taught literally from the moment you get to school to be obedient. Sit down, shut up, listen to the teacher, regurgitate what you're told, put up your hand to speak, put up your hand to take a piss, all this stuff. And the pipeline is basically you go from school into the professional class, and all of the norms of the professional class, of corporate America, of politics, and so on, are fundamentally feminine. It all prioritizes feelings, politeness, right? Process over results. We have to be inclusive and fucking listen to everybody and so on, regardless of whether or not they're retarded. And it's about building a consensus, a social consensus, right? But the fact of the matter is, most people are retarded. And if you do everything by committee, you end up generally making retarded decisions. All right. And if you've been in corporate America and you've sat through enough meetings, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Okay. The more people that you add to your meeting, the more likely it is that you're going to either A, come up with a stupid decision, or you're going to delay making a decision because, you know, not enough people have been heard, you know? All right, so what happens in these environments is that real men, what I'm calling real men, are labeled as abrasive, toxic, unprofessional, and even abusive, right? Like, go watch that scene from Glenn Ross, you know? You think this is abuse? You don't know abuse. All right, so what happens is, basically the incentive structure is set up where you either have to get domesticated or you get banished from the tribe, right? You get kicked out, you get marginalized, and so on. Escalation is punished. And so your incentive structure is basically to avoid conflict at all costs, because they make conflict so expensive now that it legitimately isn't worth it, right? So I'm not making necessarily a moral argument here. I'm just saying that all of this stuff makes it so that we're trained to avoid conflict because it's just not worth it. All right, now, pacification via comfort and entertainment. So conservatism, real conservatism, requires physical competence. All right, you have to be able to build things, and you have to be able to defend yourself, if not go on the offense when necessary. Okay, it requires mastery. It requires limits, and limits mean there are consequences, right? Like, if you have a dick, you don't get to go in the girl's bathroom, and, like, you know, there need to be consequences for this sort of thing. And then in order to really truly be a conservative man, you have to be able to tolerate discomfort. All right, but now what we really have is modern men are addicted to the dopamine drip, right? Video games, porn, okay, algorithmic sedation, infinite scrolling, and gambling, especially gambling. All right, dopamine, gambling, very important. All right, there's almost no friction anymore, right? Because of this, because conflict is heavily discouraged. Okay, so we live in a no friction society now. All right, there's infinite low cost pleasure, which makes people dependent on these things, dependent on the gambling, on the infinite scroll, on the algorithm, on the dopamine drip, right? And all of these things kill your sovereignty, your ability to be not dependent on a bunch of bullshit. All right, so in our day and age, honestly, conservatism is purely aesthetic now. It's a consumer identity, it's a brand, even a grievance economy, right? How many fucking grown men do I hear complaining about the left and how the left is insane and how, you know, the left is violent, man. The left is so violent. Like, all right, well, why don't you do something about it, huh? All right, so it's basically just a style to sell merch, right? You look at all these conservative influencers and they're all just peddling their merch, right? So you can walk around with your little red hat or whatever the fuck and, you know, cosplay at being a rebel. But really, you're being compliant, you know? You're really just being compliant in real life. And this whole rebellion thing is really just a cosplay. Why? Well, because most men cuck to jobs, to their apps, to the HR department, to their credit score, right? Female approval, all these different things. There's almost zero capacity for defiance anymore, all right? Most of the quote unquote men that I see nowadays, they're trying to be good boys in one way or another. Trying to be good boys to get mommy's approval. And this is what happens when you live in a longhouse, all right? So true conservative men in this environment, they're forced underground, all right? The public arena is feminized theater. And what I'm calling real or true conservative men, they don't perform like trained SEALs, right? They don't cuck to all of this stuff. But you know, the reason is that you're basically trained from birth and certainly from school age to seek permission, to seek approval, all right? And conservatism has basically become purely a media identity. And you look at You look at the influencers that are popular, right? Nick Fuentes and Jack Murphy and fucking Timcast IRL and Tucker Carlson and Andrew Tate and all these people, okay? They're either gay or they're feds or they're useful idiots. Basically every single one of them, no exceptions. All right. Now, what are some of the objections to what I've just been saying here? Well, someone might say there are plenty of conservative men in the military and trades and rural America and so on. And, they are what I call political conservatives. That doesn't speak to deep character and sovereignty, all right? You really have to have incredibly deep character to be what I'm calling a conservative man, and it certainly requires sovereignty. And if you're dependent on your job, on your HR department, right, on the government and so on, this is not sovereignty, this is dependence. All right. So another objection you might make is that calling society feminized is a form of misogyny, okay? And this is not about a hatred of women. I love women. I think women are great. But it's about what traits are rewarded, okay? And the traits that are rewarded are care and safety and consensus. And all of these things are what I would fundamentally think of and call feminine, all right? So another objection that you might make is that masculinity under the old model was a form of brutality. And you know what? That's valid. I would say that, yes, correct. A certain amount of brutality is actually required for healthy masculinity. All right? If you just want comfort and everything to be pretty and nice and, sugar and spice and everything nice, this is not masculinity. All right? Masculinity, once again, requires an appreciation for duty. You have to have a spine, all right? You have to have craft. What do I mean by craft? This is like you have to be an operator, all right? You have to understand the chessboard and how to improve your situation. And then in order to do that, you need to have risk tolerance, not only for physical risk, but for financial risk and all kinds of other risk, all right? This is really required if you want to be a sovereign man. All right, now, what are some of the solutions to all of this? Increase your sovereignty and reduce your dependence, all right? Build things like family, community, businesses, and just create in general. Create anything. Create something. Build something, Use your hands. Write things down in a notebook and film it on YouTube. Anything. Learn how to hold boundaries and be non-permissive, all right? And like a huge part of the feminized society is everything becoming permissive because we want to include everyone and we want everyone to feel okay. It's like, no, in a real healthy society, there need to be boundaries, and the boundaries need to be enforced with real consequences. And if you're not willing to enforce boundaries, all right, then you're complicit in the feminized, fake gay society that we have now. All right. And then act locally. All right. This one doesn't really need to be any explanation. The real world is the world that you can see around you, all right? Find something in your immediate environment, in your community, in your family, and fix it. Make communities locally. Get people together. Have your wife host a potluck, whatever. But locally. Locally is much better than thinking or acting globally or nationally, all right? And then you have to be able to withstand reputational heat. I'm going to get a lot of heat for this video, all right? If enough people watch it, someone's eventually going to call me thing that rhymes with Yahtzee, They're going to call me a misogynist. They're going to say I hate women. They're going to say I don't get it, you know what I mean? All this kind of stuff. And then the last thing I'm going to say is that if you really want a solution, be brutally honest with yourself about how you've been trained and conditioned from birth to be obedient and not sovereign. And this is me too. This is all of us. If you grew up in this society, this is 1,000% true. You've been trained and conditioned from birth to be obedient, to be a good little boy, to not rock the boat too much, to get approval from mommy. And we just have to be honest with ourselves about this. All right. Like and subscribe if you liked it. Hit the other button if you don't. If you want to follow me on X, same username, UntiedWolfDog. And the next video is going to be about how conservative influencers are fake and... Alright, we'll see you in the next video.